All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating financial paradox: getting rich versus staying rich. We usually think of wealth as this single mountain you just climb once, but it's actually a two-act play. The skills you use to build wealth are completely different from the ones you need to keep it. So let's get into why mastering both acts is absolutely crucial for your financial independence. You see, society constantly confuses spending money with actually having money. On one hand, you've got the leased BMW, literally the ultimate symbol of spending cash just to look rich. On the other hand, you have the 10-year-old Honda Civic. That represents quiet, invisible assets. The crazy thing is, the guy in the flashy BMW might literally be one missed paycheck away from total collapse. Meanwhile, the driver in that old Civic, they might secretly be sitting on an absolute fortune. True wealth is what you don't see. It's the money not spent. Section 1. Wealth is what you keep. Redefining financial success. So, as Morgan Housel points out in his Psychology of Money analysis, real wealth is totally invisible. It's that fully maxed out retirement account that literally nobody posts about on Instagram. It's the cash emergency fund that never ever becomes a cool story at a dinner party. We've been so conditioned to judge financial success by outward appearances. But the reality, those visible spenders often have a way lower net worth than the quiet savers. Section 2, Building the First Million, the Math of the Grind. Okay, look at this. This is the visual proof of how compounding actually works over time. Check out that middle row. $300,000 is actually the 52.6% halfway mark when it comes to the time it takes to accumulate $1 million. Think about that for a second. You aren't halfway to $1 million in time when you hit 500 grand. You hit the halfway point in time much, much earlier purely because of how those investment returns eventually start to snowball. And this right here brilliantly illustrates the exponential nature of compounding. That first bar shows it taking roughly 8 brutal years of grinding to reach your first $100,000. And nearly half of that comes straight out of your own pocket through personal contributions. But that second bar, it only takes about 5 years to hit the second 100 grand. That first boulder is just brutal to push uphill because you're doing all the heavy lifting. But soon, the gravity shifts, compounding takes over, and the acceleration becomes almost comical. Which brings us to a really famous quote, analyzed over at ESI Money. The first $1 million you earn is by far the hardest $1 million to make, because you start with nothing, while subsequent millions build on the previous. Their analysis of real-world wealth building found that it can take someone 19 grueling years to hit their first million, but less than 5 years to hit the second. Why? Because you finally have momentum. Your money is out there working just as hard, if not harder, than you are. And that momentum is exactly why you absolutely cannot afford to quit during those grueling early years. Section 3. The $1 million shift, when capital outperforms labor. $70,000? I mean, it's just a number, right? Well, the context here is everything. A $1 million portfolio generating a fairly conservative 7% return yields $70,000 in passive income every single year. You don't have to lift a finger for it. And what's wild is that this completely covers the average U.S. household's annual spend of roughly $67,000. This is the exact moment where your capital permanently starts outperforming your labor. Hitting this mark transforms you fundamentally. You transition from being a saver to a capital owner. A saver is constantly playing offense, trading their limited time for a paycheck. But a capital owner, they hold assets that independently generate income while they sleep. Crossing this threshold unlocks what's called an optionality mindset. You literally gain access to secret financial levels, things like private equity syndications or cheap capital borrowing. It completely untethers you from that invisible 30-year employment contract most of society is desperately bound to. But, and this is a massive but, crossing this line creates a really jarring psychological shift. See, getting rich requires intense optimism, taking big risks, and aggressively putting yourself out there. Staying rich, though, it requires the exact opposite. You need a healthy dose of paranoia, extreme frugality, and the humility to acknowledge that part of your success was probably just luck. The crucial takeaway here is that the very aggressive traits that made you rich will absolutely destroy your wealth if you don't pivot and start playing defense. Section 4. Tactics for staying rich, playing defense. The math of preservation is actually kind of terrifying, and this number explains exactly why. $200,000. If you have $1 million portfolio and the market takes a 20% hit, you don't just lose a few bucks. You wipe out $200,000. That single market swing can evaporate years of your hard-earned progress in an instant. This is exactly why you have to stop swinging for the fences and become highly defensive. You're no longer trying to hit a home run. You're just trying to avoid striking out. Now, one of the biggest threats to your wealth isn't actually a market crash. It's taxes. As outlined by Pathview Wealth Advisors, you need a tax-first preservation strategy. We're talking strategic asset location, meaning you know exactly which investments go into taxable versus tax-advantaged accounts. You have to actively coordinate gain realization and tax loss harvesting. And you absolutely need multi-year withdrawal sequencing to manage exactly how and when you pull that money out. Because as your portfolio grows, unmanaged capital gains and poor asset location can quietly eat away thousands of dollars from your net worth year after year, especially if you aren't integrating your investments with proactive CPA tax planning. Another core pillar of defense is the famous 4% rule, sometimes called the Rule of 25. Created by William Bengen back in 1994, the rule basically states that a retiree can safely withdraw an inflation-adjusted 4% of their investments annually during a 30-year retirement without running out of money. Now, sure, modern adjustments fiercely debate whether this should actually be 3% for longer early retirements or maybe 4.7% based on recent data, but the underlying principle stands. This rule is your mathematical shield for sustainable wealth defense. Section 5. Knowing when you have enough. The ultimate financial milestone. There is this fantastic story in Morgan Housel's book about a famous author attending a billionaire hedge fund manager's party. Another guest points out that the host made more money in a single day than the author made from his entire most popular book. The author simply replies, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough." It's such a great response, and it brilliantly illustrates a core danger. The inability to define enough is what makes people risk everything they have and everything they need for things they don't even want. Once your basic financial needs are covered, your whole optimization shifts. You go from maximizing your earnings to maximizing your life satisfaction. You actually start counting your wealth in months of freedom rather than dollars. Having this level of wealth, what some bluntly call screw you money, means you can stop sweating the micro decisions. You start making lifestyle choices, like maybe taking a lower-paying job for a better environment, that look completely irrational to the status-obsessed crowd outside. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Are you maximizing your earnings, or are you maximizing your life satisfaction? As you reflect on the invisible snowball of wealth we've dug into today, ask yourself, is your ultimate goal just to see a bigger number on a screen, or is it to gain the freedom to finally stop playing the game altogether? Because at the end of the day, that is the true power of staying rich. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I can't wait to dive into our next topic with you.